There were some scary moments. Things that you would never think would happen happened. Some that border on terrifying, taking people on rides down to the Titanic. They aren't called passengers. They aren't called customers. We call them mission specialists. We operate outside of normal regulation. We could hear those fibers breaking. It was the most stressful time of my life.
Welcome back, Dive Team. You just heard from Bruce Morton. He's an electrical engineer who has designed cell phones and barcode scanners, but in 2021, he took on an entirely different challenge, helping OceanGate to design and build the Titan. During my research into this tragedy, I found a compelling interview from Unfiltered Historians YouTube channel. In this interview, Bruce provided some alarming insights into how the Titan was built, his role in the process, and OceanGate's controversial use of the term mission specialists as a loophole to conduct dives down to the Titanic. Now, after watching this, I can't help but wonder, why wasn't Bruce Morton called to testify during the hearings back in September? Let's dive in and take a closer look. Before we continue, I just want to give a huge thank you to Unfiltered Historian for not only conducting this interview, but allowing us to use it here today. And he's also invited me to join him on his channel for an interview soon. So make sure to subscribe to his channel and show him some love. I also want to introduce you to the newest member of our dive team. Everyone give a nice warm welcome to Luna. She's a long-haired mini dachshund and she wants to say hello to everyone. Okay, Luna, say bye. Say bye, dive team.
I'm Bruce Morton. I'm an electrical engineer. I have been working at a company called OceanGate. I started there back in fall of 2019. In my presentation, I'll be sharing some details about it, but about me and my experience, I was hired to be the designer for a submersible, for the electrical design for a submersible that will be going to the Titanic. When I first got contacted by a recruiter, the recruiter asked me, so are you interested in working on submarines? And I'm like, no, I'm not interested in working on military stuff. He said, no, this isn't military. It's like private stuff. I'm like, really? Private submarines? And so I interviewed for the job, and I couldn't believe, I didn't even know that this company was near me. I live in Everett, Washington. So yeah, I was like, wow, that's super exciting. So I started working at the job, and I have never worked on any kind of subsea stuff before. I've always designed things like cell phones and barcode scanners and such. So, but I'm flexible, I can learn. And so I started working with a team, a small company, to design this sub. And we had our first expedition to the Titanic this last summer of 2021. That's awesome. And it was my privilege to go on this expedition, and it was an amazing experience. And it was 6 weeks long that I was working at sea, along with the rest of the company and our customers, who we call mission specialists. And I have so much to share, so many different aspects of both the design of the submarine, the experience on the water, being at the Titanic, things that I've learned about the Titanic and its history. So it was such an amazing experience for me. I've been wanting to share it. When I was on the expedition, I wrote a daily journal because I knew this was like such a unique experience, and I don't normally keep a journal, but I wrote like an hour or more every day, just of the experiences of that particular day. It's just, that's awesome. There was just so much going on. It was such in many ways, it was the most stressful time of my life. And so I left OceanGate. I will preface this with the fact that I in no way speak for OceanGate. Everything here is just my own personal experience. So this is just my own opinion. I definitely don't speak for the company. Right. But I am still a contractor for the company. Cool. They don't need me to design another sub or design this sub, but they do still need me for things that come up, for maintenance stuff that come up. And so as things come up, I'm still contracted with them to help out here and there, and maybe even go on the next expedition. I don't know. We'll find out. Cool. Go back in a few months. But anyway, with that context, let's start the presentation. So this is an early rendering of what the Cyclops sub, or one of our subs, was to look like. And I'll show you actual pictures of what the sub ended up looking like. But it's OceanGate subs are a little different from most other submersibles in that they're 5-person subs, large viewports, and just the configuration is different from most. Like I said, we'll be covering the company, we'll be covering the design of the sub and the expedition and the Titanic history, and we'll cover it other times, but also I should have time today to talk about the future directions for OceanGate. So we have OceanGate started in 2011. Basically, Stockton Rush he's from a rich family. He's got a lot of money behind him, and when he was young, he wanted to be an astronaut. But he figured out right away that he's wealthy, but not wealthy enough to be able to build his own rocket company like some guys around here. So what he decided to do is go in the opposite direction. Instead of going up, he decided to go down and to be a ocean explorer. And he also wants to be an inventor. He doesn't want to just make something that we're just use standard methods and techniques to create submarines. He wants to break new ground, use new technologies to do things in a new way. And you could say that Elon Musk is doing the same kind of thing. No one had ever imagined, not even NASA had thought of putting the rockets up and having the rockets land face up. And it's a beautiful thing when it's actually successful. And so that's what we've done at OceanGate. We've done things in a completely different way. Our sub has different features, and I'll be going over that. Mm-hmm. So the company is small. This is kind of mostly a company shot. We have some of our customers in here too. This is from our expedition. And the purpose of the company, like I said, is not just for us to go to the ocean, but to open the ocean for exploration for citizen scientists. If people can pay to go to space, well, people can also now pay to go to the depths of the ocean. Because not anyone can just go and say that they want to join a scientific expedition. Now, the difficulty here is that we operate outside of normal regulations. If you were to make a tourism company and you want to take people onto tours of a reef or something, you can use a Coast Guard approved boat and take people out on a ride, and you have to pay, and you operate within regulations. But the thing is that we are so small, and nobody else has ever done, or nobody else currently does anything else that we do. We operate completely outside of any regulations, not because it's what we're doing is wrong. It's just that no one in the government has imagined us or anyone doing anything that we're doing. Right. And so we are trying to work with the Coast Guard to become certified, but they have to create a whole new set of regulations for us. And we can't just sit around and wait for them to create regulations for us. So we just operate. We just do what we do. And the way that we're able to work around any kind of regulations is we're not in the business of taking people on rides down to the Titanic. They aren't called passengers. They aren't really called customers. We call them mission specialists. Mm-hmm. Basically, the idea is that they are joining us to be part of our expedition, and they have to do work too. The people who are on the ship, they aren't just coming and this is not like a cruise. We'll have them do things like prepare drop weights and to prepare the fairings for putting the fairings back on, or many other tasks that are needed to maintain the sub and recharge the sub and get it all ready for the next dive. It's a major operation. It isn't as simple as like taking your boat out onto the lake. There's a lot of preparation when it comes to diving and operating and the sub. So Stockton started out making a hobby sub. It's this one in the upper left-hand corner. It's called Suds. And this is literally, it looks like it's made out of propane containers. I wasn't around, of course, when they made this. And it wouldn't surprise me if they actually did make these out of propane containers.
It does look starkly familiar, like a propane container, yeah.
Yeah. And it's got wood, and you don't put wood on the sub. It's just, it doesn't work. But yeah, he did what he had to do to make it work, and that's on a regular boat trailer. But this was just his first little experiment. The first real sub that they've had in the company is this one on the upper right called Antipodes. This used to be a larger vessel, and it's been modified over the years. And it's the thing that's really cool about it is you can't see it in this picture, but there are two hemispheres on the sub, one in the front, one in the back, and it can seat 5 people. So you can have 2 people sitting on the front looking out this full 180 degree dome, and 2 people in the back. So everyone has a front row seat. The pilot sits in the middle. It can only go down 1,000 feet, but that's perfect for the Puget Sound, which is where we're located.
Right.
And it's a great sub for developing one of the patents that we have in the company, that is for this diving platform. It's basically the idea that one of the most difficult parts of diving a sub is getting it in and out of the water. Once it's in the water, it works great. It can maneuver, it can go up and down, but that whole process of getting the sub out of the water and getting people in and out of the sub, it becomes very cumbersome because it sits low in the water, and it's not safe to load people in and out when sitting in the water. And also, how do you get it in the water? Do you have a crane? Cranes are expensive. Cranes are also problems because when you have seas that are moving, the swells can cause that sub to swing around. And when you have like a 25-ton sub swinging around on a crane, that is not safe.
No.
So you'll see pictures of our diving platform that we use for Antipodes and Cyclops and Titan. So Cyclops is similar to that first slide that I showed. That this is what it actually looks like, where you have the full-size acrylic dome.
Mm-hmm.
All the electronics are in the back, and we have 4 thrusters, 2 verticals and 2 horizontal thrusters for maneuverability. And it has a hatch, a little dome hatch on the top for people to get in and out.
Okay.
Now the one that we took, the Cyclops can only go down 500 meters. What would that be? That's about 1,500 feet, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I have a good sense of meters to feet. So that's also just only good for shallow dives, relatively, compared to. I mean, it's deep compared to like any kind of military sub, but still not deep enough for the Titanic. So what about Titan? Titan is different from the others, and these are the distinct things about it. It's the largest capacity DSV in the world. And what does that mean? Those other subs, those are 2 and 3 person subs. This sub holds 5 people. What's an extra 2 people? Well, that's a big deal, actually, because if you can take, if you have 1 pilot and 4 passengers, there's a lot of economies of scale to take that many people down to the Titanic versus if you can only take 1 or 2 passengers. And actually what we do is we have 3 passengers. We call them mission specialists. 3 mission specialists, a scientist or archaeologist, and a pilot. So that way the people who are in the sub will be able to not only see what they're looking at, but know what they're looking at. Because if you go down to the Titanic without any kind of guide, other than the bow, you have no idea what you're looking at.
Right.
It just looks like lumps of rusted old metal. But if you have someone in there going, oh, that's the reciprocating engine. Oh, that is the captain's quarters. Oh, that is the telemotor where the ship was steered from. Then it becomes a really interesting expedition and makes it worth it going. So anyway, largest DSV in the world. It has a carbon fiber hull. There's titanium domes on the front and back for the pressure vessel, but in the middle, it's a cylinder of carbon fiber, and I'll go into that. Why would we use carbon fiber? Because, well, I have a slide on that too, so that's further down. It has the largest viewport in the world for that depth. It's you'll get I have a picture of that later on. It's big enough for two people to look out the window at the same time.
In your opinion, this is from Todd Rhodes. In your opinion, is the Titanic being loved to death?
The Titanic is decaying no matter what we do. It's the metal part of it is rusting and being destroyed. There are two main camps when it comes to the Titanic. Some people look at the Titanic as a grave site that should not be visited, should be left alone, should not be disturbed, and that people shouldn't even go down and take a look because it was such a tragedy. It's like, for some reason, people feel like, if you go down there, you're disrespecting the people who have died. I can understand that point of view. Another point of view is that it is an archaeological site. The bodies and bones are long gone. There's no trace of human remains down there at all. But what there is down there is the ship itself, the steel, the glass. What is preserved are the bottles and the floor tiles and the plates and the dishes. And there's even luggage. Leather doesn't. I was surprised to know that leather does not deteriorate.
Really? So does that explain the shoes? I mean, because some of the shoes were made of leather too, right?
Exactly. So you'll see shoes and clothes down there that and
clothes too.
Clothes. Yeah, I think so. I think clothes too. Maybe not clothes, maybe not fabric, but a lot of things are preserved in there. But even if you say, okay, those things are preserved, they should be left alone. Well, it's like I said, it's an archaeological site. Thousands of artifacts have been pulled up. And if those had not been pulled up, they would be lost to the ocean. And why would it be valuable? What value is there for those things to be destroyed by nature? Right. Why not preserve them and remember them and honor the dead by seeing what they had and possibly even returning those items to their ancestors? And some of those things have been done. Some of those things have been returned to their
that's cool
ancestors. I think even letters have been preserved and been returned to their. It's a big controversy. There's even legal issues attached to the Titanic because the British government, the Canadian government, the U.S. government do not want people to go and visit. If they had enough resources, the governments would have prevented us from going. We had to go through a bunch of legal hoops and in order to be able to do what we wanted to do. But we're doing it anyway because they're not able to really enforce their desires. Like the NOAA, the National Oceanographic Administration, they didn't want us to go, but they're not willing to go put enough effort to sue us to prevent us from going. But what we try to do is try to work with the officials. And we had some government officials with us on the ship to try to work with them to convince them, hey, look, what we're doing is respectable. We're not disrespecting the dead. We actually had a memorial service on the surface.
That's awesome.
Every week that we're out on the dive. Okay, so back to the slide. There is no hatch on this sub. When you get in and out of a normal DSV, it's through a very tight hole to get into the pressure vessel. Stockton, our founder, didn't like that. He wanted something that was more convenient for our mission specialists. And so that front dome, it swings open. There's a hinge on the other side and it completely swings open so that you can get into the sub without having to squeeze through a tight hole. And it's very convenient because when it came to assembling the inside of the sub and all the electronics, being able to bring things in and out of the sub, being able to assemble major sections of the insides and be able to just slide it in and insert it into the sub made assembly super easy. It would have been so much more difficult if we had to bring in each individual part through a tiny hatch and then assemble it inside. Really, it facilitates not only entry and exit of the passengers, but also of all the items that go into the construction of it. We have a toilet. One of the main things that people are worried about when they get on the sub, and we tell them, oh yeah, each dive is about 10 to 12 hours. And they think, oh man, how am I going to hold it for that long?
10 to 12 hours. Oh yeah, I mean, all the time on the ocean floor. But that brings up something, again, I'm sorry for the questions, but we got some really good questions coming in. How quickly can Titan descend and ascend when exploring Titanic?
Okay, so the typical dive is it takes about 2.5 hours to get down and 2.5 to get up. And then there's about 4 or 5 hours of bottom time. It's about how long it takes.
And then the pressure was also.
The pressure, I don't have a number off the top of my head, but the pressure is at that depth is enough to kill you instantly.
I've heard that.
Yeah, there's the pressures at that depth are unfathomable. You just cannot imagine how much pressure, and yet there's creatures down there, but the way that they're able to survive down there is because they have no air gaps. Our lungs, we breathe air, and any kind of air gets completely crushed, gets completely dissolved. And so one of the things that we do is we have these, just to kind of demonstrate that, we'll put on the outside of the sub, we'll attach a bag full of styrofoam cups. And styrofoam cups, since it has air in there.
Mm-hmm.
And those cups, when you get totally crushed, and when you bring them back up, they stay crushed. And so you'll take a cup that'll be, a normal size cup, maybe about 5 inches tall. Come back and it looks like a shot glass.
Wow.
And so yeah, it's and so
that's crazy.
The hull has to be extremely strong, and there can be no gaps, because any kind of crack or gap, water would just come streaming in.
That's it.
Yeah, and it would be. There's no way that people would be able to come to the surface fast enough to be able to survive.
Mm-mm.
So yeah, a hull breach would be instant death. Yeah,
safety is important there. Then
yeah,
it shows you want to build the best.
And I'll go into what we did to make sure that we had safety. So the toilet is basically it doubles as a front seat, and I have a picture of it. Now people will think, oh well, it's not as private, but it's like there's a privacy screen, so people will be able to hear and smell, but it's tight quarters in there. So the way that the sub is steered is through a wireless game controller, just like an Xbox controller. It's nice because you're able to pass around control from person to person. So somebody can be sitting in the front dome and can be driving around, or they can be sitting in the back looking at the large screens. And we have no seats in there per se. It's just an open floor, and you'll see a picture of that. And then there's large media screens on the inside so that people can see what the cameras are seeing on the outside. Okay. And so this is what it looks like inside. It's very, Spartan is not the right word. It's very basic. There's not much in there because everything is digital. It's kind of like a Tesla in that, there's 2 controller screens and a media screen in the back. And you see there's a power button. You can see the power button right there. There's a panel that flips out that controls all the circuit breakers. Okay. And other than that, there's just a keyboard for each of those screens. One computer screen controls all the systems on the sub, and the other one controls all the media, like the cameras and the sonar. It can hold 5 people very comfortably. In fact, one thing that's nice about having an open floor is that people can rearrange their seating location. So 2 people can be sitting in the front looking at the dome. If somebody wants to lay down, there's enough room for somebody to lay down. It's pretty convenient. We do have these little stadium seats so that someone can have something to sit back on, but it's pretty convenient. This is my daughter. She's sitting on that toilet. It doubles as a front row seat. The viewport screen here in the upper right, it's very thick glass. It's like about 5 inches thick or so, and it doesn't distort the outside. It's optically, it looks like just a flat window when you're sitting there underwater. But wow. In actuality, it's concave on the inside and convex on the outside. But this is the pressure vessel all by itself. It's right here in the lower right. We had it on the back of a truck, and we sent it all the way to the East Coast to be tested. I'll go into details on that. So that kind of gives a sense of scale of what it looks like. Yeah, and so from that, we had to build up all around it. We had to put all the thrusters and the cabling and all the electronics, and it was a bit of a process. So the core, the most basic part of the sub is this center hull, of the pressure vessel. And it's made of carbon fiber. It's 660 layers of carbon fiber tape, and it's 5 inches thick and 55 inches in diameter and 100 inches long. It's and what are the advantages of it? So it's carbon fiber. Not only is it strong, but it's lighter than the comparable amount of titanium. It also weighs less. It also costs less. The weight of your pressure vessel is very important when it comes to a DSV, because you have to make your sub neutrally buoyant. Now, if you have something that's really heavy, you have to compensate for that by having foam to make it lighter. If you have a large pressure vessel with very thick steel and it's very, very heavy, like if we were to make this out of titanium, we would have to have an inordinate amount of syntactic foam, which is the type of foam that we use. It's a special type of foam that is incompressible and can withstand the pressures at the deep depths. And so you end up with a sub that would be super big and unwieldy and not easy to maneuver. For our sub, for Titan, it was so light that we only needed just a little bit of syntactic foam in order to keep the trim so that it's level in the water. Because otherwise it would tilt forward it would tilt forward if we didn't put any foam on it. We're able to have a smaller size overall of the sub. So this sub is about the same size as those other DSVs, but it holds twice as many people. So anyway, what's this contraption? This is the robotic arm that was used to lay down all those 660 layers of tape. This is a company in Mukilteo, Washington, near us, called Electro Impact. And basically, this is a robotic tape dispenser. That's a very simplistic way to think of it.
Right.
Takes these little strips of carbon fiber tape and it lays it down in a very precise way so that it doesn't overlap from layer to layer as it goes around. And it also heats it up as it's depositing it. So because you have to, this thing at the very tip is a heater. So it deposits that tape and in a very precise manner. And we had to do it it took months. It actually took a couple of months for this robot arm to build that hull. It was a very long process, but we learned along the way. We did some test builds before we built the actual hull, and so we knew how to avoid the issues that we were having earlier. And so we had a pressure vessel that was actually rock solid. It was so. Let me go back. This pressure vessel, or this carbon fiber hull. One thing that we do, I didn't mention, we monitor the safety of the hull in two different ways. We use acoustic sensors and we use strain sensors. The acoustic sensors listen for ultrasonic pulses that can happen. The microscopic carbon fibers, when they're under pressure, the hull does flex. Even though it's 5 inches thick, that carbon fiber moves very small amounts, a few millimeters, but that's enough for some of those fibers to break. Now, those fibers, if enough of those fibers break, then you're going to have a hull breach and people will die. So if we can listen in and hear those fibers breaking, we can know ahead of time if it's going to fail. And so we use that as a predictive process. The good thing is that the first time we tested the hull, we put it into a hyperbaric chamber. We could hear those fibers breaking, but then on all successive dives, successive tests, it was quiet. So we kind of like worked out all the kinks out of it. So it's kind of like a spring. So under pressure, it compresses a little bit and then it relaxes, but there's no more fibers that break. So we had no issues at all with the hull. It was really nice. So we designed the sub in CAD before we built it in real life. And the nice advantage of this is that we had all the parts built and ready to go, so that when we got that hull back from testing, we were able to assemble the sub in just about 2 months. And so that was really fast, both the insides and the outsides. The external systems on the sub there's 4 thrusters, there's cameras and lights, we have buoyancy control, The way we do buoyancy controls, we have a ballast bag and we have a high pressure air tank. It's kind of like similar to scuba diving. And then we have drop weights that control buoyancy. So when first diving, the sub is very heavy and it drops. And then when it reaches the bottom, we drop a few weights to make it neutrally buoyant. And then when we're done diving, we drop a few more weights to make it positively buoyant. So then it'll go back up. So basically, the fuel for a part of the fuel that allows us to go up and down is steel pipe. And then we have tracking systems. The sub doesn't know where it's at when it's underwater. GPS doesn't work. Compasses do work, by the way, but we have a ship on the surface that has access to GPS, and the ship uses a sonar system to monitor where the sub is. And so, and we know where the sub is in relation to the ship. And so then we can guide the sub to where the wreck is. So we can say, hey, as they're dropping, hey, you need to go a little bit northeast, or you need to go a little northwest. So we can kind of guide them as they go down. And I was very impressed. On every one of our dives, we ended up right on the wreck. It was very good. Very expert systems. And then there's communications. There's a VHF radio from when we're on the surface. And the communication, we send and receive communication over texting. It's like a sonar modem. And so it's not voice communication. So this is what it looked like naked without any covers on it. Well, at least most of the covers.
Right. Jeez.
So you can see the batteries and the motor controllers and all the cabling. I like this picture because this shows my handiwork. This is all I made the circuit boards and these cables that go all around. It was a lot of work to route this.
It looks incredibly difficult. I mean, props to you for that.
And then there's internal systems. There's internally, there's 3 computers. There's we have a computer for we have hull monitoring, where we, like I mentioned earlier, where we listen for sounds of the hull. We have CO2 scrubber and an oxygen supply. So it's very interesting how it's very simple how to monitor and to maintain the atmosphere inside the sub. The way that we basically, all we have to do is we take CO2 out of the air and we put oxygen into the air, and then people can survive. And the way that you pull CO2 out of the air is by taking a box with this powder. It's called soda, and you blow air onto this powder and it absorbs CO2. So basically it's just a box, a plastic box with a fan on top of it. Okay. And then for oxygen, we have these bottles of oxygen, not air, just oxygen. And it's amazing. A bottle of oxygen that's only about maybe 2 feet by 10 inches cylinder, that's enough air, or that's enough oxygen for 5 people for 10 hours.
Wow.
So, now we have emergency supply of oxygen that can last 5 people for up to 3 days. And we have enough absorber for 3 days. So if they get stuck down there, we've got a few days to help them in order to get help and to bring them to the surface. Fortunately, we didn't have that issue.
Good.
Okay, so then there's batteries, there's circuit breakers, there's power distribution, there's internal Wi-Fi only for the internal, it doesn't go external. Radio signals do not travel through salt water at all. And then we have water detection, because there's condensation inside the sub, and there can be some water that can condense on the bottom of the sub. And so what I worked on, all these systems that I just showed in the last screen are right here. This goes into that rear dome that doesn't have the window. So this gets pushed into that hemisphere, and there are the 3 computers. There's this power box on the right, and there's custom circuit boards that I've got to connect it all together. And the wiring for this was very tedious.
Good Lord.
So yeah, this was represents a lot of work, and but it was, fortunately, I was able to do most of the wiring when it was outside the sub, and then once we had the sub, we could just slide it in, and that was just I can't imagine having to assemble this all inside the sub if we had just a hatch. So here's what it looks like when we first tested it on the vessel. And I mentioned earlier about our diving platform. This is our diving platform.
Okay.
The sub sits on the platform. The platform is this hollow, has 4 hollow air chambers. And so when the platform is on the water, it floats. And then we have these valves. And when we want to dive the sub, we let the air out of those chambers and the whole platform sinks. And so then the sub, when it's underwater, can fly off of this platform without any divers being in the water.
Oh, neat.
And so it's safer for divers. It's safer because we don't have to have a crane, and we're able to the sub can be kind of autonomous, or in that it can fly off, and when it wants to come back up, it flies back onto the platform, and then operators raise the platform, and we're working on a system where where the pilot themselves can raise the platform. But yeah, this is off the back of the ship. We built this ramp, this big orange ramp you see. That was they built that for us so that we could launch the sub, and that's a huge piece of machinery. And
I'll say, yeah, it is.
Yeah. And but we're going to use that year after year for the expeditions. So in a future presentation, I'll tell you about the expedition itself. So what's going on with OceanGate right now? We have raised the price of going to Titanic to $250,000. And now some people say that's expensive. Some people think that's cheap. Depends on your perspective, I think. But the reason why it's that expensive is because there's a huge support to be able to do that. That sub is expensive to build, and it's expensive to operate, and it's no easy task to bring a huge 18-ton or 18 kiloton vessel out to basically the size of a small cruise ship out to the ocean, dive the sub over and over again, and to do it safely. So right now, the company is working on getting more customers, more mission specialists. So the sub is currently on the East Coast, going around the country on a tour. These events that they're showing the sub are not public events. In other words, someone can't just come off the street and pay a few dollars to see the sub.
Right.
These are invitation-only events, really geared towards people who are qualified or able to actually afford to go on the Titanic. But if you are one of those people who could actually possibly afford to go onto the OceanGate Expeditions website and apply. But that's pretty much, we're at the hour mark. That's pretty much all I've got for today.
The more we learn about OceanGate, the harder it becomes to ignore the troubling patterns from their practices. From using untested materials and unconventional adhesives to exploiting terms like mission specialists as loopholes, the company seems to have prioritized profit and innovation over safety and ethics. What does this say about the risk we're willing to take in the pursuit of groundbreaking achievements? And where do we draw the line between exploration and recklessness? Know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more as we continue to uncover the truth about the Titan tragedy. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.